Hello Anatomy, welcome to our video lecture for Chapter 1, the human body and orientation. So as this is our first video lecture, let me just remind you that at any point during this video, you can pause it or go back. If you're taking notes on the lecture outline and you miss something, like I say, just pause it and feel free to go back at any time. So this class is called Anatomy and Physiology. So what's the difference? So anatomy is the study of the shape and structure of the body and its parts. So anatomy itself is lots of memorization. So if you are studying the anatomy of the heart, for instance, you might memorize the chambers of the heart, memorize the vessels or the valves in the heart. Physiology is the study of how the body and its parts work and function. So if we were doing the physiology of the heart, for example, we might study how the chambers contract, how the different valves work. Obviously, the story is incomplete unless you have both. We're going to learn what the parts are and how they function, which is why this class is called Anatomy and Physiology. Gross anatomy, oftentimes in medical school, your first year, you might take a notorious class called gross anatomy where you dissect a human cadaver. So gross anatomy, gross just sort of means all of it. Gross anatomy involves the large structures that are easily observable. So for example, this diagram shows the gross anatomy of your digestive system. This is a later chapter in the book. We'll learn all these parts later. Things that are easily recognizable and easily observable. Microscopic anatomy would be structures that you can't see with the naked eye, things that you need a microscope to view. This slide, for instance, shows some microscopic anatomy of your stomach and your digestive system. And notice lining the stomach are these things called gastric pits, which look very, very small. They might be small, but they're also very, very deep. Lining the gastric pits are these sort of columnar-shaped cells, many of which secrete different things, like gastric cells or gastric glands secrete the low pH sort of enzymatic juices of your stomach that help you digest stuff. And the reason why these pits are very, very small but very, very deep is it increases the surface area of the lining of these pits. The more surface area you have, the more of these cells you can have, the more gastric juices the stomach can secrete. So levels of organization in organisms, this is stuff you've been doing since elementary school. So the basic unit really of all matter, whether it's organic or inorganic, would be atoms. Atoms make up molecules. Atoms and molecules, make up all of life, but they also make up cells. Cells then make up tissues. Tissues make up organs. Organs make up your 11 or 12, depending on the textbook, organ systems in the human body, which obviously make up an organism. So this is a diagram from the book. It should just show you what I'm talking about. Atoms make up molecules. Here I have molecules making up a cell. In this case, it's a muscle cell. Muscle cells make up muscle tissues. There's 3 different types of muscle tissue, which we'll see in a later chapter. Muscle tissues are one kind of tissue, and the organs that are your blood vessels. Blood vessels are actually organs. There's epithelial tissue that lines the vessel. There's connective tissue. There's smooth muscle tissue. Organs that make up organ systems, in this case, this would be part of your cardiovascular system, your heart and your blood vessels. And obviously those make up organisms. So now we're going to go through the 11 human body systems. So this slide just lists them all. We're going to go through them one at a time. So depending upon the textbook, some say there's 11, some say there's 12, it depends. Your textbook combines lymphatic and immune system into one. Some textbooks separate them out. Some textbooks, for example, have a system called the excretory system, which is really just part of your, really kind of a combo of your digestive and your urinary system. The scheme of 11 systems that your book uses is the most common one, so it's really the best one to go by. So we're going to go through the 11. Obviously, this whole textbook is on the 11 body systems, basically. Here we're just going to name what they are, show a diagram, and then briefly describe what each system does. So the integumentary system, say that 10 times fast, is basically your skin. It forms the external body covering of your body. It has many functions. Largely, it's for protection, keeps things that are outside, keeps things that are inside. Your skin does help regulate your body temperature. If you get hot, you sweat. If you get cold, you shiver. And lots of your nerve endings, your cutaneous nerve receptors that allow you to feel, are also located inside your skin. Your skeletal system would be obviously your skeleton. The function here would be to protect and support your body. Things like your rib cage is for protecting your lungs and your heart. Obviously, bones are also for support. Bones also provide muscle attachment. So any place on a bone where you have a part that kind of flares out, like if you look at your femur here, the ends are sort of rounded and enlarged. Places where bones stick out are where muscles attach. If muscles can't attach to bones, your muscles can't move your bones. So your skeleton also serves the function of providing muscle attachment sites. Blood cell formation in your bone marrow. Red blood cells, white blood cells can be formed inside your bone marrow. And your skeleton also stores minerals like calcium. If your calcium levels are low, your bones will actually give off calcium to help increase your blood calcium levels, and vice versa. If it gets too high, your bones can absorb some of that calcium. So the muscular system is your muscles. Obviously, your muscles produce movement. They allow you to move. It also helps maintain your posture as you're sitting in your desk. You're sitting upright. Your abdominal muscles are somewhat contracted, or your back muscles, to help maintain a good posture. So even if you're not moving, your muscles could still be contracted to maintain your form. Muscles also produce heat. Your 98.6 or 97.5, depending upon who you're talking about. The average body temperature is produced by heat given off by your body, largely your muscles. The nervous system is called the fast-acting control system. Your body has two systems for communication. One is your nervous system. The other one's your endocrine system, which we'll talk about in just a minute. The nervous system is the fast-acting system because it happens faster than the endocrine system. And this is a way of your body to respond to internal change and external change. Your nerves can also activate muscles. Your nerves are what control your muscles. It can also activate glands to produce whatever hormone that they're supposed to produce. The endocrine system, like I said, is some folks call it the slow system. It's really not that slow, but the effects of the endocrine system take longer to start than your nervous system. They're also longer lasting. Your endocrine system is based upon your hormones. Regulatory hormones might do things like causing you to grow, might regulate your metabolism, might cause changes in reproductive organs. Anything that involves hormones is part of your endocrine system. And notice your endocrine glands are sort of scattered throughout your body. Oftentimes organs, like the stomach is a digestive organ, obviously, but your stomach also produces hormones. So your stomach is also technically an endocrine organ also. Most of your organs actually fall in more than one organ system. The cardiovascular system would be your heart and your blood vessels. So this is the transport system of your body. So your heart pumps blood to transport things like oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients from what you digested for lunch, and then also waste products. Your lymphatic system, so this is one that a lot of people are not that familiar with. So as your blood goes through your blood vessels, it's actually a little bit leaky. Your blood vessels actually lose fluid to the cells surrounding your blood vessels. That's called the interstitial fluid. And if that fluid has no way of getting back into your cardiovascular system, then you'd have a swelling there. You'd have what's called an edema. So your lymphatic system, which textbooks usually show these vessels as green, they're obviously not really green. Those are vessels that sort of circulate with your blood vessels, and they reabsorb the interstitial fluid that your blood vessels lost, and they return it to your blood vessels. Lymphatic tissues, which sort of collect into what are called lymph nodes in your neck, your armpit, your groin. They also contain lots of white blood cells. So if you're sick, if the doctor is feeling your neck, it's because he or she is feeling your lymph nodes. Because if you're sick, your lymph nodes might be swollen because you're having an immune response to being sick. So your white blood count might be going up because you're sick, which means your lymph nodes might be swollen. Your respiratory system, this one's pretty obvious. This would be your mouth, your throat, your esophagus, your lungs. This is for breathing in and breathing out. Largely, it's to supply your blood and therefore your cells with oxygen, and then to remove CO2, which is a waste product produced by your cells. Digestive, so this would be breaking down, what you had for lunch. Food goes in your mouth, waste come out the anus throughout your digestive system. There are several functions. You're digesting what you ate, you're absorbing the nutrients that you want to absorb into your blood, and you're eliminating the things that you don't want to keep in your body through your anus. Urinary system, this would be your kidneys, your ureters, your bladder. So basically what your kidneys do is your kidneys filter out your blood, and they remove several wastes, including things called nitrogenous waste, which we'll get to when we do the chapter on your kidneys. You know, your blood is like the nutrient highway of your body, and so since your kidneys filter your blood, your kidneys can control the content of your blood. So it filters out things that it wants to get rid of, which are going to urinate out, but it also can help maintain the acid-base balance of your blood. It regulates the water content of your blood. If you're dehydrated, you urinate less. That's because your kidneys can control how much water stays in your blood. The electrolyte, the amount of salts in your blood, that's also regulated by your kidneys. And the last organ system is the reproductive system. This is the system that's required to produce more organisms, or in this case, more humans. You know, most of my cells can reproduce more cells of that type. Like my skin cells can make more skin cells, right? But to make more people, you have to go through the reproductive system. In males, the testes is the main organ. In females, the ovaries are the main organs of reproduction. More on that later. Okay, so changing subjects real quick. So homeostasis. So this is a very, very, very important topic. So you've heard this word before. Homeostasis is your body's ability to maintain a stable internal environment. Your body is always sort of trying to define normal, whether it's body temperature or blood pH or blood oxygen levels or blood calcium levels. Your body wants to figure out what normal is, and it wants to keep it at normal. Most diseases are basically homeostatic imbalances, where the body's normal way of finding normal and keeping things at normal is off, some kind of disorder. You know, diabetes is a disorder of your blood sugar. For whatever reason, your insulin either isn't functioning properly or you don't make enough insulin. It's a homeostatic, it's a disorder based upon balance. So it's very important for us to understand what homeostasis is and what happens when things, you know, get away from us, when things get away from the body's normal balancing system. This diagram from your book, this just shows, you know, of the 11 body systems, they all interact. So going through this briefly, and this isn't rocket science. So, you know, you eat. Food comes in your mouth, goes through your stomach, your intestines, waste comes out of your anus. So as you digest food, that food winds up in your blood vessels. And the point of your blood vessels is to pump blood and the nutrients in your blood throughout your body, okay? Well, as I'm breathing, you know, you want to take in O2, you want to breathe out CO2. So I'm breathing air into my lungs. Well, blood capillaries also go through my lungs, and they're in my lungs, oxygen's loaded into my blood, and CO2 is loaded back into my lungs to exhale. And then when my blood goes through my kidneys are filtering my blood. Things that I want to urinate out, my kidneys take out of the blood. Things that I want to keep in my blood, your kidneys make sure stay in your blood. And then your blood goes through what's called the interstitial fluid. This just means that your body is exchanging nutrients and oxygen and CO2 and salts and waste and all the things carried in your blood. It's exchanging it with your cells. So even though we have 11 different body systems, they really all interact largely through the cardiovascular system. You know, I said a minute ago, most diseases are a result of a homeostatic imbalance. So let's just go through one quick sort of scheme as to how this works. So say you have a stimulus. Let's do, I don't know, let's do body temperature. Let's say that you're getting too hot. You want to be, you know, 98.6. A more modern number is 97.5. We'll talk about why that is more in class. Say your temperature is up to 99.5. You have a stimulus. You have an imbalance. Some kind of receptor detects that change. The afferent pathway, so affect versus effect. Let me go ahead and put both these up. Affect is a verb. If something affects me with an A, that's a verb. Effect is a noun, all right? The effects of something. So let's say that I'm getting too hot. I have a temperature sensor in my body that says I'm getting too hot. The afferent pathway, these would be nerves that take that signal to my brain or to my spinal column in some cases that says, you know, here's the signal, I'm getting too hot. Well, the efferent pathway would be nerves that go back from my brain or spinal column back to my skin. If I'm getting too hot, I need to sweat. So the efferent pathway with an E might activate sweat glands that make me sweat, that would then cool me down. And then the effect would be that my body temperature comes back down to normal. So an afferent pathway with an A takes things from the outside and sends signals to my brain or spinal column in some cases. The efferent pathway or the effector is basically what's the effect of that stimulus. If I'm too cold, I might shiver. So take the example of being too cold. The afferent pathway says I'm too cold, then my brain sends signals to my skin, which says shiver because I need to warm up. All right, afferent is first with an A, efferent is next with an E. Afferent is the verb, efferent is the noun, or affect is the verb, effect is the noun. So in terms of feedback, so the example I just gave was if you're too hot or you're too cold. Most feedback pathways in your body are negative feedback, which means whatever the stimulus is, you want to shut it down. I get too hot, I want to bring it down. If I get too cold, I want to bring it up. My blood pH gets too acidic, I want to make it more basic or less acidic. It works like a household thermostat where I have normal, and if I get too high, bring it down, get too low, bring it up. Most homeostatic feedback pathways in your body are negative because you want to keep things balanced, all right? If my blood calcium gets too low, my body will secrete hormones that cause my bones to give off calcium to bring my blood calcium back up. If my blood calcium is too high, there are other hormones that will cause my blood to lose the calcium to my bones, or to have my bones reuptake the calcium, so my blood calcium levels go back down. All right, those are called negative feedback. Positive feedback, there really aren't that many in the human body. This would be where I have a stimulus, and my body basically wants stimulus to happen more and more and more. An example is blood clotting. Usually you don't want your blood to clot, right? But if I have a cut, your blood starts to clot, and then it keeps clotting until the wound is healed. Childbirth is another one. When the uterus is contracting, those contractions start to amplify until the baby is born. So those two examples, actually breastfeeding is one too. The suckling reflex, when a woman's breastfeeding, the more the baby suckles, the more milk the woman produces. When the baby stops suckling or stops breastfeeding, the mom's milk supply goes down dramatically. So most examples in your body of feedback are negative feedback. Positive feedback would be things like childbirth, blood clotting, and breastfeeding. Okay, now, switching topics again. So the language of anatomy. So there's lots of maybe they're new to you, maybe they're not, words in anatomy. A lot of them come from Latin. These are terms used for position, for direction, for regions, or for structures. Knowing what the terms mean, like anterior, posterior, ventral, dorsal, superior, inferior, things like that. This is how anatomy people or doctors or physicians communicate. So this is a diagram from your book, and you need to know what all of these terms mean. All right, and this is a lot. So you're going to want to spend some time with this diagram. Let's go through them briefly together. So here's an anterior view of the body. This is the front. Here's a posterior view. Here's the back. So cephalic refers to your head. So frontal is your forehead. Orbital are your eyes. Nasal is your nose. Buccal are your cheeks. Oral is your mouth. And mental is your chin. Okay. Cervical refers to your neck. Thoracic are the regions of your chest. Sternal would be where your sternum or your breastbone is. Axillary is your armpit. Pectoral would be your chest. Abdominal region would be like where your belly button is. Your umbilical region is your belly button. Pelvic, the inguinal region, is your groin. And pubic obviously would be your genitals. All right. For your upper limb, the acromial would be like the flare of your shoulder. You can feel what that bony projection is. Your deltoid is your upper arm. This muscle here is called the deltoid muscle. Brachial is your upper arm. Antecubital would be the opposite of your elbow. I guess your inner elbow. Carpal is your wrist. Whoops, didn't you do that? Manus refers to your hand, and digital refers to your fingers. So your lower limb, coxal is your hip, up here. Femoral is your thigh. Patellar is your kneecap. Popliteal is sort of like the back of your kneecap, the back of your leg. Crural is the word for your lower leg. Fibular would be like the outer portion of your leg. The pedal or the foot region. Tarsal is your ankle. Calcaneal would be the heel of your foot, the back of your foot. Digital are your toes, and plantar is the bottom of your foot. So going on this side, the back of your head, the occipital region is the back of your head. Cervical, again, is your neck, in this case, the back of your neck. The dorsal area of your back, scapular are your shoulder blades. Vertebral would be your vertebral column. Lumbar is your lower back. The sacral would be like the end of your spinal column, sort of where your tailbone starts. And gluteal would be your tush, right? So these terms, we're going to practice these terms in class, but you need to know, if I say point to your brachial region, you should know what I'm talking about. So something a little bit easier. So directional terms, these usually come in pairs. Superior or cranial or cephalid means closer to the head. Inferior means closer to the bottom of your body. So for example, your eyeballs are superior to your mouth. Your sternum, dropped my pen. Your sternum is inferior to your chin, okay? And by the way, one thing I left out. So if you look at the silhouette, so this person is standing in anatomical position, which is basically, legs, shoulder length apart. Your palms are out with your forefingers together and your thumb out like that, and you want your palms facing forward, and they're sort of extended out from your body. If a word means front or back, if your hands like that or like that makes a difference, right? So basic anatomical position are like this guy or girl is pictured, with arms extended and palms facing outward. Ventral means in front of, dorsal means behind or the backside of. So my nose is ventral to my brain. My spinal column is dorsal to my lungs. Medial means closer to the midline. My heart is medial to my elbow. Lateral means further away from the midline. So my thumb is lateral to my belly button. Intermediate means between a more medial or more lateral structure. So you could say that my elbow is intermediate of my shoulder and my fingers. Means basically in between. Proximal and distal. So when this slide talks about the origin of a body part, the origin means where it attaches to your trunk. So the origin of my arm is my shoulder. The origin of my leg would be my hip. So proximal means closer to the origin of the body part. So with the arm, the elbow is proximal to my fingers because the elbow is closer to the site of origin. Distal means further away. So my toes are distal to my knee because the origin for your leg would be your thigh. And since your toes are further away from your thigh than your knee, that means that they're distal. Superficial means closer to the body's surface. Deep means more internal. So my skin is superficial to my nerves. That's not really the best example. My eyes are superficial to my brain. That's not a great example either. Usually arteries are deeper in your body than veins are because arteries have a higher blood pressure. So usually veins are superficial. You can see them to your skin, right? And arteries are deep. That's a better example. So the body planes. So there are 4 main body planes. A plane is just like an imaginary surface. A sagittal plane is a plane that cuts the body into left and right halves. If a sagittal plane or sections down the exact middle, that's called a mid-sagittal plane, where you divide the body into equal left and right halves. A frontal plane means when you divide the body into a front and back half, or an anterior and a posterior half. Transverse would be like a plane that's parallel to the floor. Like if I dissect a body through your abdomen, like parallel to the floor, that's a transverse plane. This diagram shows this better than maybe I'm saying it. Here's a mid-sagittal plane. Here's a frontal plane or coronal plane. Here's a transverse plane. if I wanted to do a transverse plane that included the brain, you do it up here, right? If I wanted to do a frontal plane of the lungs, you would have a plane like this where you divide the lungs into front and back halves. So the body cavities, the dorsal, dorsal means behind, ventral means in front of. The dorsal cavity is the cavity, or there's two parts. The cranial cavity houses your brain, and your spinal cavity houses your spinal column. Your ventral body cavity, which is in front of the dorsal cavity, there's two main parts. There's a thoracic cavity, which houses your heart, your lungs, your rib cage. The abdominopelvic cavity houses your main digestive and urinary organs, like your stomach, your intestines, your kidneys. This picture shows the difference. The dorsal cavity is yellow. The ventral cavity is this sort of reddish or pinkish color. Here's your cranial cavity. Here's your spinal cavity. Thoracic cavity has your lungs and your heart and such. The abdominopelvic, or you can separate them into two separate abdominal and pelvic cavities, house your digestive organs, most of them, and most of your reproductive organs. So we're going to end with just dividing the body into quadrants. So one thing to notice, in anatomy diagrams, the left and the right seem backwards. And this is important because if you're labeling things on a test and you get left and right mixed up, you're going to miss a bunch of stuff. So if I'm looking at a textbook diagram, if I picked up the textbook and like put it on myself, then left and right would match. So like take a drawing of yourself, draw it on yourself, then put it in front of you. The left and right are backwards. Like this is my right hand, but if I was superimposing a diagram, like laying on a piece of paper and turn it around, it would be your left. So left and right are always backwards on diagrams. The quadrant system, the left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant, right lower quadrant, right upper quadrant, pretty self-explanatory. For example, if you have appendicitis, you have inflammation of your appendix, that's right here. So that would be a pain in your right lower quadrant. If you have an inflamed gallbladder, this green thing right here is your gallbladder, that would be pain in your right upper quadrant, which again is the right side of your body. On the diagram, it's the left, but again, left and right are backwards on anatomy diagrams. You can also divide the abdominopelvic cavity into these 9 regions. The middle one being the umbilical region, like where your belly button is. Epigastric and hypogastric. Gastric refers to your stomach. Epi means above or on. Hypo means below. Notice your stomach is largely in the epigastric region. The left hypochondriac region, the right hypochondriac region would be these left and right quadrants or sections on the top. Lumbar refers to your sort of like your lower back, so the left lumbar region, the right lumbar region, the left iliac or inguinal region. The right iliac or inguinal region would be to the left and right of your groin. Notice, like a physician would know, like if you have abdominal pain, they would know what organs respond to what regions. For example, again, the stomach is largely in the epigastric region. The appendix is largely in the right iliac region. So they would, relate the terminology to where the pain is to know what the problem could be. Okay, so that was chapter 1. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you guys next time.